Just a heads up, everybody, this is being streamed on YouTube right now. Hope everybody's well.
Why are we streaming on YouTube?
Dr. Kilburn, I think, wanted to open up these meetings to the public.
Huh. Okay.
Chris,
Right.
Michelle,
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, folks.
hi Dave, how are you?
Okay.
Dave, just a heads up, we're streaming this live on YouTube tonight.
And they told us that.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I got the note from Zoom. Yeah.
Okay.
Scott, was that the reason that the Zoom link had changed?
Yes, it was. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Scott, when you get a second, can you give me rights to share my screen?
Of course. Should be all set, Joanne.
So Dr. Kilburn is trying to get in the meeting right now. She didn't have the new link. So I just sent it to her. So it should be in a minute.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Hi.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't have the new link. I apologize. Joanna, do we have everyone here now that I'm arriving late to the meeting? So, are we still waiting for anybody? No, I think we're ready. Okay, so you may have noticed we are live streaming. We had gone through our committee charts as a board, and I had the attorneys look at that, and it came to their attention that this is an open meeting of the public. So therefore, we have to provide the link and allow people to view it. And I believe that might have been in either a blue memo for the board or on a s'more. But so we are open for the public to view this process. And I guess we're moving forward. Are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we are on our first policy, policy 15, equal opportunity and prohibition of discrimination and harassment, including sexual harassment. So if we open the floor up, I think, correct me if I'm wrong from the policy service, but what I really saw were just changes, I think, really around the protective hairstyles and hair texture being added to the language. I didn't really see any significant changes to this policy. So I didn't have any questions. Were there questions from anyone in our group?
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, Chris or Scott, did you guys have any questions or thoughts or ideas?
I do not.
So I'm feeling like this is moving forward. Dave Pello, anything we need to know in this policy that stands out?
No, I think you characterized it correctly, that there was some refinement in state law around the definition of what constitutes race or ethnic discrimination. And so we've been updating policies in different districts as we go along. And I think also there's language on page 2 to address the interface between the disability discrimination, the need for accessibility, and our use of technology.
That's right. That's right. That was the other part. Okay, so seeing no objections, this is moving onward to the Board of Education. Which brings us to policy number 16, instruction and employment of human immunodeficiency virus infected individuals. And again, I didn't see anything here that stood out other than the disclosure and the need to keep things on file within the district superintendent's office. So I had no questions on this policy.
My only question on it is HIV something we really do need a separate policy on? I mean, the whole situation has changed since this policy was created. And all it does is reiterate standard procedure for every other infectious disease, or immune disease or disease.
Right.
Is it really unique anymore? That's my question.
Well, and that's a very fair question, Gary. I think that, and you'll notice it's not tagged, Jennifer's team is not tagged it as a required policy. But this was probably one of the prior times we went through a health situation in our country, similar to what we're doing now, right? And there was a lot of attention to the stigmatization of patients with this particular condition, which I know you realize that, Gary. The way it's different maybe from our overall infection control measures is that there's actually a whole sub-article of the public health law directed at employers, and this policy back in the day was developed to specify that. So I think it's been carried forward because there are some very specific provisions in the public health law that it's good to remind administrators of, school nurses and what have you. So it does kind of stand on its own.
I did have a question. I apologize. I had forgotten that I had a question on the last page of the policy. So in the back part of the policy, when it comes to the actual instruction regarding HIV, there's all this underlined language, which I think are adds to the policy from the policy service. And they're pretty specific. So I don't know what relevance, like why particular, are we just defining what's previously mentioned in the paragraph above, or is there something new that's come out that we have to particularly attend to? That was one question I had on the page. The other question I had on the page had to do with the HIV Advisory Council. Same thing, is it right? I'm not aware of that right now, so that's something we'll have to start doing if we haven't already have that in place. Can you help me out to understand that?
And Jennifer, you might be able to address that more specifically than I. But in general, we've got regulations of the commissioner here that came along.
Yes, and it says, it just outlines the commissioner's regs and what does need to be done for the instructional piece.
Okay.
But also you do have to have an advisory committee.
Okay. And I'm guessing that we might be able to leverage that does it have to be a separate committee of its own, or can it be an existing committee that adds this duty to it? As long as we're meeting the duty, the requirements of the policy. Is there any thought on that?
I don't think, you could probably add to a committee as long as you have specific people that are required to be on the
Yeah.
committee.
On the committee. All right, so thank you for that. Chris, are you aware that we've had an acting HIV committee before? Mr. Hill, are you still with us?
You're muted.
Oh, I'm muted?
No, Chris is.
Oh, Chris is muted.
Sorry, I was having a hard time finding the mouse, the mouse cursor. No, we have not addressed this. I'm assuming we could make it part of shared decision-making or part of safety, actually, the district-wide safety, we could make it part of that. I'm guessing, Jennifer, we would need to just make sure that those items are, those members that are required are present, and we'd have to make sure it's on agendas, that discussion is on an agenda.
Correct.
Okay. So thank you actually for spelling that out, because I'm guessing that in previous policy, it was just listed maybe as that upper paragraph in terms of classroom instruction without it being broken out like that. So it brought that to our attention. So thank you for that. Which I think helps the question Gary had, that maybe we do need to have, this policy specifically. Any other questions about this particular policy? And I want you to just know that on my screen, I can't see everybody, right? So because we're screen sharing, I can only see about 5 of us. So please feel free to speak up, because I might just be barreling along, and it's not because I'm trying to barrel away. Okay, so that's ready to go before the board. We just have to be aware that we have to add that procedure. So the next policy is 17, defense and indemnification of board members and employees.
I'm good.
Yeah, I was good on this too. We had just reviewed it in 2019, and there doesn't seem to be any changes recommended.
Mhm.
I'm good.
You're good, Michelle. Great. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts about this policy? Okay, hearing none, we're going to say that one is good to go, which moves us on to policy 18, student registration and pre-registration to vote. It's a required policy, last adopted on March 11th of 2020. I had no questions.
I'm good.
Michelle is good. Gary, how are you?
I'm good.
Gary's good too. And the rest of us? Is everyone good? Of course, I have 2 gentlemen, luckily I can see them, who give me thumbs up after I just said I can't see everybody. But I'm glad I got to see them. Okay, that's gonna go. And we're on to policy 20, tobacco, nicotine, and e-cigarette use prohibited. Last reviewed on September 18th. I did have a question about this. I feel like we just did a lot of work in this area in another policy, I want to say recently, within the past 6 months. So I kind of had like, don't we already have policies around use of drugs and alcohol? Like, is this something that's better served combined with something else, or really as a standalone? Did anybody have that same question or no?
You do
I have
have
a question, but it's
drug
a
and
different.
alcohol.
Okay.
You do have drug and alcohol policies, and then this one, we always do recommend standalone because it's tobacco, nicotine, e-cigarettes.
Okay. So keeping it, like not incorporating it, but just having it as a separate policy particular to those things.
Right, because you have to, like a drug-free workplace, that is a required policy that standalone. Then you might have the drug and alcohol policy for students, drug and alcohol policy, transportation for the bus drivers.
Yep.
And then this one, the tobacco, nicotine, e-cigarette, prohibited use on BOCES property.
Okay.
Dr. Kilburn, I think the environment that you face, and any school district faces, is that wise people who populate our state legislature, and for that matter, our federal legislature, tend to address those different categories of substances with different laws
Ah,
and say different things about them. And so it's kind of hard to wrap everything about substances into one policy. Then we might have Gary, for example, pointing out how long that policy would be and how complicated. So I think we tend to break it down into the different subjects so we can track what the legislature has told you to do about it.
fair enough. All right, so my question is answered. Gary and Michelle, did you
Yeah.
guys have any questions? Go ahead, Gary.
Good.
Michelle?
Oh, no, I was just saying I'm fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay, mine is simply on section 3 on the first page, proactive practices. I'm just wondering if that doesn't open us up to some liability of some former student getting cancer and saying it's because we never educated them on the dangers of smoking. Any thought?
I'm far enough away from Jennifer that she cannot actually kick me under the table, but I think the reason for that, Gary, is that one or more of the legislative or statutory references at the end tell us we're supposed to come up with a program of proactive steps to implement what the statute's trying to require. So when our policy service responded to this, we came up with the descriptions that you see in the 4 sub provisions there, which we felt were common to what school districts do and were doable. Certainly, the language of any of those could be changed if it's felt that they set a bar too high. As you know, one of our first principles is don't adopt a policy you can't, implement.
Well, that's the second question here. Have we implemented it? Are we doing this?
I would say that our health curriculums proactively address in both 8th and 8th grade and high school proactively address this without a doubt. And I would think our EAP program would be the connection to the cessation programs. Don't you think, Dr. Kilburn?
I absolutely would agree with that. And I
I'm
know,
not
go ahead.
sure what the last thing you said is. Your
EAP program would link into the secession aspect of this.
What is our EAP program?
It's the employee assistance program. So when employees need assistance with kind of personal life matters, they can tap into the EAP program direction. So in terms of maybe trying to stop smoking, there would be assistance there.
And appropriately integrated into curriculum and appropriate instructional staff will receive training. Sounds like it's asking you to do a lot more than that.
Well, it says here, so if you look at B, smoking, tobacco, and nicotine cessation information, right, will be available to staff, students, parents, guardians, and guardians and visitors. So in terms of the staff piece, the EAP staff, EAP piece, we have cessation information there. It's a good question about cessation information being made available to our parents, guardians, and or visitors, right? So I know information for students is part of the curriculum. That would be a part of it. I don't know, and I will check to see, do we have like brochures or something at the entrances of our building that are like, hey, want to stop smoking? Here's where you can call, or here's what you can do. Like you see them often in doctor's offices and stuff like that, So I can check. Sometimes a lot of stuff like that you'll see in the nurses' offices or on the bulletin boards outside the nurses' offices, things like materials like that. So we can certainly check to see that that's available to meet the criterion of making that available to parents and guardians as well.
Yeah, but somebody taking auto shop isn't going to get anti-smoking information.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know, does it, I guess the question would be all, right? So if we look at A, smoking, tobacco, and nicotine use prevention will be appropriately integrated into curriculum and appropriate instructional staff will receive training in this, right? So
Yes.
that's not all, that's as appropriate. So we're not going to teach some of those lessons to first graders. But what about B? And I guess, Dave, I think Gary's point would pertain to B. If you look at B, it makes it seem as though we have to go to all of our students, all of our staff, all of our parents and visitors and say, hey, welcome to the BOCES. I'm so glad you're interested in the culinary program. And FYI, if you want to learn how to stop smoking, here you go.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe there should be as appropriate, or I don't know,
Upon request.
upon request or posted, or, it is a little odd, Gary. I appreciate your deeper reading of that. I agree.
Well, probably your welding class is taught not to light cigarettes around your flammable gases, but I'm not sure because it's been a while since I looked at the actual wording of both the state and the federal laws, right? But certainly you could modify the B to, as appropriate, as feasible. So I think some modification there would be possible. I mean, it would pass muster.
As you know, I always like to water these down as much as
Yeah.
possible.
I think, Dave, if you remember, I think we also developed most of this language. I think districts and BOCES were receiving grants. Remember years ago, receiving grants about what they had when they were posting signs and
Yes.
getting and making sure the policy was in place, and you had to do certain things to get grants for to help with your signage and everything like that. Chris, you were shaking your head. You probably remember that.
Hmm.
And that's where this derived from too, as well. I think putting some information into the policy. Because I think I remember working with someone from Oneida BOCES, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, which grant. And yeah, you're probably right.
Yes.
And it was,
And there were pamphlets available for anybody that was interested. Even having pamphlets and signs, even handing out pens or pencils. There was a bunch of stuff that they were handing out at the time to help anybody that wanted to stop smoking.
So I love that that's possible and we might still be able to do it, but does that particular portion of the policy need to be there as a matter of policy?
Right.
That
So we
would be-
Well, if you wanted to, we're on a roll here. It's kind of a shame, but if you want to set this one aside, we certainly could take a look more specifically at the laws themselves and how closely this language is required versus something that we tried to smooth out, for implementation, and we can get back to you on that.
okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. All right, so we're going to table this and we're going to bring it back with revision. Okay, let me just write that down. And that brings us to policy 30. Code of ethics for all Board of Cooperative Educational Services personnel. And I want to make sure I'll check all pages right now before I say I have no questions. I have no questions.
I'm good.
All right, Michelle, are you good with this policy?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Anyone else? Okay.
I'm good.
All right. The only thing I want to make sure that we're checking on is that we are ensuring that board members are, when they're new to the board, they're coming on board, they're getting a copy of this policy. I think it's actually in the handbook, but I'm not positive. So I will be sure to just check back and make sure that we're keeping fresh on this as we have some new members to our board. But other than that, I think it's good to go. Wow, I have to tell you, that might be the most efficient policy meeting I've ever been in my career so far to date. Are there any other topics related to policy that we want to make sure we discuss this evening? Okay.
All right, well, we've got one takeaway for our side of the table, so we'll go do our homework.
Wonderful. I want to thank everybody for their time and for meeting in the virtual realm. It was really good to see you all. And I hope that you have a great remainder of your week and a good weekend. And we'll
Okay.